Okay, we're off and going. I'm a-coming. Here we go. Okay, this is kind of a continuation of Notes to Self, based on the old stock books. See those for ideas of what is still viable, I guess. Also, when I'm out shooting, I want to keep these things in mind because I'm maybe shooting one thing. I've definitely had this happen a couple of times. I'm out shooting one thing and I say, well, what about this also? And this is, I'm hoping it's going to help me with my shooting. Could probably help you too. That's why I'm doing this, for me and for you. I've been on Shutterstock now for about 3 months and about 600 images up and had about 80 sales. And of course that amounts to barely enough to buy a cup of coffee based on current rates. Unlike the old days, you might get thousands of dollars. You get 25 cents today. But hopefully enough of this in enough places make you a few dollars. So I'm going through, I talked about with this particular version of the old stock market book that they used to send out. And I'm going to been going through chapter by chapter to, which is actually category by category, to see what ideas, to see what continues on being viable. So this is the first run on this. My little notes to go from. The first chapter starts out with style. And it was interesting because they're using style not as a definition we would use today. We might think of fashion styles or a stylish place or a lifestyle. Certainly lifestyle is very prominent now. They were kind of saying, well, this style is kind of our creative. And this, as I recall, is at a time when they're trying to move away from the idea that stock was simply going to be the standard stock businessman shaking hands. And of course, I'll have that in here, but getting more that they represented the creative side. You can find your most creative stuff from your stock agencies. You don't have to go to a special high-priced studio. You know, we're going to have it available. You can see what you're buying from us. And their idea was mostly kind of doing, this is kind of their abstract pages that they had, their creative pages. They were doing bold colors and was kind of the first era of Photoshop going on. So they were doing photo collage images coming together where they're combining things, combining illustration with actual photographs. And it was trying to say that we're artsy. we're not just your standard 1950s kind of look. We're now hot, and we're moving into the 70s. We can do black and white. You know, we're doing interesting things. So it's kind of interesting to see that they were trying to shift their image at that time. And the first thing they led off with was that chapter. Today that idea lives on, but it goes more in with the abstract pages and conceptual. I'm kind of seen as categories with the other agencies. So that's where they started. The next one, which is interesting, that still lives on, was travel. And travels go back to doing the grand tour of Europe. It goes on for way back on it. It still goes on today. And so it still remains a mark. And I see a lot of times people on YouTube, they're mostly traveling the world. Everybody sees this a great thing to do, travel the world and take photographs and be able to live on that. And it used to be that was a time when travel photographers were out there, and they did particularly for magazines for doing that. So the travel photo for stock lives on. Part of the idea is that it used to be you have to send people out on assignment. And to send somebody out to an exotic location on assignment was very expensive. And in this case, it's like, well, you can get your stock image from us, but you're not having to pay that big expense to send a photographer out to this exotic location at great expense and risk to be uncertain about what kind of photo you're going to get. You can just come to us and we got photos on file and you can pick out exactly what you want. And that kind of is still what's going on today. And that still looks like it's a category then and now that lives on. When I saw what they were doing, they're showing images of destinations that we think we know. And they're showing the images how we think they should be. They're not so much showing new stuff, like, oh, this is the unknown part over here. They're basically showing if this is how you've seen the Taj Mahal. We've got a picture that looks like the Taj Mahal. Maybe we got some birds flying around it or something a little different. But otherwise, it's pretty much as you expect to see it. And I think a lot of that still carries on today. It's certainly been my experience. Have had 2 opportunities where people have gone through and said, oh, you've got a whole bunch of photographs of the Columbia Gorge and you've got a whole bunch of photographs of Mount Hood, and I'm sure you've got a great one that'll be very nice and very different. And what they end up doing is going back to the same classic photograph of Multnomah Falls and the same classic photograph of a snowy Mount Hood reflected in Timothy Lake. You know, I had hundreds of images to choose from, but the expectation seems to always go back quite a bit to what's already been done. The thing is, agencies are going to have that in their files. Does that leave much opportunity for somebody new coming in? Well, you'd have to be very creative and very different, but still look like it's always looked like. So it's interesting observation I was able to get out of that. They do a lot with looking at the buildings and symbols that we're used to seeing, expecting to see from a location. But they're going to do it with more drama than your snapshot would be. They're going to be a little tighter on the details that you might find on a location. So that's, you got to work that twist out. Also, tourists in the location. They're showing that these people are traveling, they're at the destination you may want to go to. Here they are. Therefore, you could go there too, and they're having a good time, and it's safe for you to go there. So incorporating people into the photographs and people like themselves, people that the viewer can say, oh, that looks like me. They're there having a good time. That's okay. That's where I want to go. And they're doing it. I can do it. So that, I think, was in the past, and that kind of lives on with it. They're showing with the local way of life. Part of the things is travel, and I know Rick Steves does this with his travel through Europe and stuff, is to go through and learn about the local people. And even back here, they were doing this with showing the locals doing their daily life, or showing the locals that you might be going in to see, showing the daily life of the laundry up in front of the house, or whatever the Tibetan flags coming off of one of the, can't remember the stylus, can't remember the exact name for that. So that kind of goes on then, and it's going to go on now. Showing people in action. So a little more active lifestyle now. So they're showing people, they might be dancing, playing flutes, in with their daily life, making boats, moving around, that seems to be items that I was finding was kind of consistent through the book. But a lot of stuff that was shot back at this era probably would work today, except the style of clothes have changed, or buildings are no longer there. The big difference, of course, we have now is everything on this one is going to be on a two-dimensional plane. And I think for travel, the drones have really changed that type of photography. Also now we can work on a three-dimensional terrain, and we don't have to get a big expensive helicopter or do the big balloons we used to do with cameras on them. Now you can get a drone, fly that up. It gives you a different perspective on things. But it doesn't give you the details. It doesn't get you in with the locals. And so there's still going to be opportunities with that. And I'm doing a lot of photographing in the local area, so it's something I got to keep in mind when I'm doing it. A lot of the stuff, even more so now, is going to be done more as editorial. It's going to be continued hard to go through to get it as commercial, unless you get releases for people and places and things. So that's going to remain an interesting challenge. They did have some abstracts in here. So you may be having some your streaking light kind of things, or dark shadows of people walking by and through on things. They did some really bad collages of that look really hokey now, but back then it was like, ooh, Photoshop, isn't that cool? But all that part's all changed. So it was interesting to get some ideas. I mean, they're got the classic heads of Mount Rushmore are going to be there. Well, they're still going to use the classic heads of Mount Rushmore. They're still going to have people driving over the Golden Gate Bridge. A lot of the stuff, amazingly, in this area is timeless, and yet I think the interaction of people is going to be far more, which is going to be unique and different today. How they're approaching the scene. In Portland here, we got the scooters running around. So it might be more somebody zipping on a scooter to get to a spot. So that's going to be an interesting challenge. I'm working on that myself. So again, it's kind of note to myself to remember this. Okay, that's all I want to cover. Just 2 chapters. I don't want to make this too long. Got a lot of chapters to go. Some of the stuff gets more fascinating. Kind of been through all of it now as I move on. So, note to myself to look at this on occasion to remember about what I'm supposed to remember. So, anyways, hope you found that useful. And if you did, thank you for watching. Bye.